Number 11. Christmas Day Murder. On Christmas morning, 56-year-old Aziz Yazdanpana went to his ex-wife's house dressed as Santa. She and their children were in the middle of opening gifts when he showed up. Police later found the phone of his niece and saw she sent 2 texts to her friend around that time saying, quote, "So, we're here. We just got here and my uncle is here too, dressed as Santa. Awesome." And then, quote, "Now he wants to be all fathery and win Father of the Year," end quote. Then Yazdanpana pulled out a gun and opened fire on the family, shooting his son, daughter, niece, sister-in-law, and ex-wife. During this time, he placed a call to 911 where you could hear someone asking for help before he said in a low and calm tone, quote, "I am shooting people." In total, he killed 6 people and himself on that Christmas day. Aziz and his wife had separated earlier that year, and he had been unemployed for almost a decade and not financially stable. A family friend suggested that after Aziz's separation, he was jealous of his wife's success despite being alone, suggesting that this was a possible motive for the murder. Number 10. Satan Santa. 67-year-old Bruce MacArthur was a grandfather, diligent landscaper, and a cheerful mall Santa Claus. However, he had a secret. This Santa was also a gruesome serial killer. In the years between 2010 and 2017 in Ontario, Canada, MacArthur preyed on the LGBTQ community. Over the years, he managed to lure 8 men to his home, slowly torturing them before killing them, and then performing lewd acts to their dead bodies. He would then dismember his victims, chopping their bodies into pieces. But because he's a serial killer, he wanted to keep pieces of his victims as trophies. He buried the remains in various potted plants at the homes he did landscape. During a police investigation, authorities removed 15 planters from 30 properties MacArthur had done work on and brought him in for questioning. After further exploration, the police found a hard drive containing a folder for each of his victims. These folders contained photos of the missing men, dead and alive, with many of their corpses posed in explicit fashions. Further investigations indicated most of the victims were restrained and sexually assaulted before being killed. Police also found duct tape, surgical gloves, rope, zip ties, and syringes. Bruce MacArthur, who was a truly sadistic necrophiliac, has been sentenced to life in prison. Number 9. The Worst Christmas Party. The Covina Massacre is easily the most famous of the Santa Claus sleigh rides. On December 24, 2008, the Ortega family was hosting a Christmas Eve party in Covina, a small city in the suburbs of Los Angeles, California. Just before midnight, there was a knock at the front door, and a little 8-year-old girl opened it up to see a darling Father Christmas, aka Santa Claus. But underneath that suit was actually a complete psychopath, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, an ex-husband of one of the Ortega daughters. Pardo shoved his way into the house and started unloading bullets. It was absolute chaos. Everyone started scrambling for their lives. Then Pardo unwrapped the present that he had brought with him. It was a flamethrower he had made himself. Then, with a gun in one hand and a flamethrower in the other, he torched the house and shot 9 of the individuals that were there. The flames rose 50 feet or just about 15 meters high. It took 80 firefighters to extinguish it. Pardo fled the scene, ditching the Santa suit. Police later found him in his brother's house, dead by a self-inflicted gunshot. This Kris Kringle did not escape unscathed from the flames. Authorities found bits of the Santa suit burned into his skin. Number 8. Christmas Mall Shooting. In 2012, during the holiday season, 22-year-old Jacob Tyler Roberts went to a mall in Portland, Oregon wearing a hockey mask. He had one clear intention: mayhem. He pulled out an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle and opened fire. He killed 54-year-old Cindy Ann Uleel and 45-year-old Steve Forsyth and left many others severely wounded. The mall Santa that was there at the time was about to see the next child in line when the gunfire rang out. The 68-year-old Santa, Brance Wilson, dove to the floor in panic. He described what was a terrifying event. Quote, "I heard 2 shots and got out of the chair. I thought a red suit was a pretty good target." End quote. Santa did his best creeping to safety while the 22-year-old Tyler Roberts continued his shooting spree. Friends of Roberts described him as a fun and happy guy. No one saw this coming. Roberts never gave a motive for the crimes and is now behind bars. What do you think happened that made Roberts snap? Let us know in the comments down below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 7. Two Evil Santas. In 2012, in the city of Jaffa, Israel, two men wearing a set of Santa Claus masks and beards ended up committing a heinous crime during what should have been a beautiful Christmas ceremony. Allegedly, the motive involved a property dispute between the Abumana family and the Jaffa Orthodox Church Association, which owned the land that the family's home was located on. During the parade, two men, 24-year-old Fuad Abumana and 26-year-old Tufik Dalu, wore Santa Claus disguises and proceeded to stalk the leader of the church association, Gabriel Caddis. Concealing knives between their Father Christmas disguise, the two men followed Caddis to his car. It was in the parking lot that Mana stabbed Caddis twice in the back, severing a major artery and puncturing his lung in the process. Caddis collapsed to the ground and bled out from the injury. Then the evil Santas fled the scene. They just left him to die. But when police checked security cameras, they knew who the suspects were. Mana and Dalu were eventually charged with murder and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Number 6. Christmas on Halloween. I guess technically you can dress as Santa for Halloween. It's an odd choice, but it's been done. On October 31st, 2017, in Austin, Texas, a man dressed as Santa Claus was having a Halloween party. The host was 32-year-old Randall Gaston Jones. According to eyewitnesses, Jones was drinking pretty heavily at his party. So much so that he started behaving poorly, and his guests told him he should probably just go to bed. Upset that his friends told him to call it a night at his own party, Jones suddenly returned with a loaded gun. He fired a shot at the floor, sending the guests scattering. 37-year-old Michael McCloskey, a brave attendee, tried to tackle Jones and ended up being shot several times. Jones then unloaded more bullets, injuring 3 people. When police were finally called to Jones's house, they found the victims covered in blood. Tragically, McCluskey died from his gunshot wounds, and Jones was promptly taken into custody. Number 5. Wild West Christmas. In a scene that seems to be ripped straight out of a Wild West film, an ex-convict by the name of Marshall Ratliff put on a Santa suit in the small Texas town of Cisco. He then entered a bank and robbed the place. On December 23, 1927, Ratliff and some of his ex-con friends held up the bank at gunpoint and left with more than $12,000 in cash, which was a lot of money back then, and around $150,000 in other items. The crew shot up the bank, leaving over 200 bullet holes scattered across the walls. Ratliff, dressed in the big man's red and white suit, took 2 female hostages and proceeded to lead the police on an epic chase that one witness described as, quote, surpassing anything in which Billy the Kid or the James Boys had ever figured, end quote. When the chase was finally over and Ratliff was captured, Ratliff ended up pleading insanity. The citizens of Texas were having none of it, as they broke Ratliff out of jail and lynched him for his crimes. In the end, the botched robbery ended up costing 6 people their lives, including 3 of the robbers. Number 4. Stabby Santa. In late November of 2005 in London, England, a man dressed as Santa Claus murdered another man, and police have never figured out why. The man in the Santa disguise walked into the apartment of 25-year-old Sikandar Shaheen and stabbed him. He then left the scene, leaving behind the white beard and red hat. A neighbor heard the commotion and opened their door, saying it sounded, quote, like someone had woken up from a nightmare. They attempted to chase the attacker, but were unable to catch him. Upon returning to the apartment, the neighbor saw Shaheen collapse in the hallway, and that's where police found him, bleeding from several severe stab wounds. Shaheen was taken to the hospital, but he was unable to describe his attacker before he died, and to this day, the killer has never been found. Number 3. Killed over candy. In December of 2004, 49-year-old Elkin Clark was working as a mall Santa in Atlanta, Georgia, when he severely beat 74-year-old Annie Nelson with a 2x4 board. The two were selling chocolates together when, according to Clark, he became enraged when the elderly Christian evangelist stole 29 boxes of Hershey's from him. He told police, quote, "She was stealing my stuff," Clark said at the incident. "I asked her 10 to 15 times to not touch my stuff. According to witnesses, Clark struck the old woman over the head and then hit her twice more while she was lying unconscious on the floor. Aisha Albritton, someone who witnessed the horror, then tried to help the old woman, to which Clark threatened her with the wooden board. Nelson died of her injuries 6 weeks later. Clark was convicted of malice murder as well as simple assault of Albritton. His conviction was upheld by the Georgia Supreme Court in 2013. Number 2. Gropey Santa. You might think that Santa Claus is just a jolly big man, but here, that was not the case. Bad Santa Herbert Jones was arrested in 2013 for touching the butt of an 18-year-old co-worker against her will. Dressed as Santa Claus, he pinched the buttocks of his lady elf while working at a shopping mall in Hanover, Massachusetts. He then told her he would like to date her if she were older. What a creep! In a police report, the young woman reported to the mall manager that Jones had been stalking her. Shockingly, the manager told her to talk to Jones about it herself. When the cops arrived, Jones told officers that it was actually the teen who was acting inappropriately, brushing her hands against his hand. And for his creepy comment, he said it was taken out of context. Although Jones was arrested on indecent assault and battery charges, he was eventually released after paying a bail of $1,000. He was also banned from wearing Santa costumes for the holiday season. Number 1. Detective Santa. Santa by day, detective by night. This was the story of 23-year-old Ricky Holland, the mall Santa. This lad from Valdosta imagined that living was more than gifting or spreading the love during Christmas, and thought of actually giving back to society. His plan to do this was to bring down a drug group by setting them up with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. He volunteered as a police informant, sharing information with police about a secret drug ring. However, Ricky, who was well loved at the mall, was shown no love by his killers, as he was discovered shot in the head, stabbed, and brutally beaten. A cement block had been used to bash his skull. His mission had failed, and unfortunately led to his death at the hands of the members involved in the drug operation. Quote, "He was just a citizen who was trying to help out," said Lieutenant J.R. Winningham of the Sheriff's Department. "A lot of times these drug people will think these people are ratting to the police." The culprits, a 21-year-old Paul Lewis and 28-year-old Michael Eugene, were apprehended before the mall Santa's body was found. Merry Christmas, and thanks for watching! Which of these creepy Santas will give you nightmares? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time on the Bad Badger.